The face on the high command screen belonged to a ghost. A caged, early machine-age species was taking over a locked Imperial crystal frequency with perfect, clear sound. No warning, no demands, no mercy. Captain Yara Okonkwo smiled. Not a cruel smile, but a very patient one. Red dots bloomed across the grand tactical map on Orth Prime. Dozens of dots sat right on top of Hegemon supply routes and fleet staging grounds. 5 more strange ships dropped out of the dark space behind her. "You have 72 hours, Okonkwo said. Choose wisely." The real terror wasn't how they fought. It was what they already knew. 2 hours earlier, Observer Primus Kale Morinth had been bored. He stood on the amber-lit bridge of the huge dreadnought Eternal Dominion. His 4 eyes blinked slow and lazy. The Hegemon Dominion had ruled these stars for 3,000 years. Nothing out here in the deep dark posed a real threat. The sensor officer clicked his mandibles. A single ship drifted near the edge of the locked human zone. "Hull makeup looks like crude metal," the officer reported. "There are no matching power signatures." Commander Vithar let out a dry, clicking laugh. "Have they finally built a ship that can leave their little rock? How ambitious." Morinth noted the date on his glass data pad. It was just a routine border event. Vithar ordered a standard warning shot. A bright plasma lance burned through the dark. It passed exactly 100 meters from the strange ship's bow. The human ship, the Resolute, did not turn around. It did not slow down. Instead, the flat gray hull surged forward. It sped up so fast that any normal flesh and blood crew should have been crushed into heavy paste against their own walls. The sensor officer's mandibles locked tight. The lazy click stopped completely. Impossible speed. They are not stopping. Vithar slammed his heavy fist on the control panel. He opened a visual channel to demand total surrender. The main screen flickered on. Captain Okonkwo stood on a very plain, gray bridge. A heavy brass compass hung at her hip. The needle spun slow and lazy, not caring at all about the ship's gravity pull. It was an old toy from a world that once sailed deep oceans without stars. Okonkwo brushed her thumb over the cold brass shell just once. She did not speak. She did not blink. She just watched them. Then the comms feed cut to dead black static. The Resolute dropped its thin stealth covers. Long, thick weapon ports slid open along its dark spine. They did not glow with hot plasma. They did not hum with bright particle beams. They stayed completely cold and dark in the empty void. Morinth stepped back from the thick viewing glass. A deep, bone-rattling vibration echoed through the dreadnought's outer sensors. Thousands of solid metal slugs fired at near light speed. The Dominion shields flared bright yellow across the void. Hegemon shields were built to catch energy weapons and spread out pure heat. They were not built to stop dense physical rocks moving that fast. The slugs punched right through the energy fields like they were made of paper. They did not hit random spots on the hull. They struck exact, hidden internal power nodes. "Shields dropping fast," the officer yelled, his voice cracking hard. "They are hitting the exact emitter points." Vithar's 4 eyes went wide. His breathing spiracles whistled with sudden, sharp stress. Emitter nodes were buried deep inside the thick ship armor. No one could find them through active shields. They tracked, they fired, they vanished. The Resolute kept moving forward. Vithar smoothed his ceremonial gold collar with a shaking hand. He took a slow breath and ordered a routine reactor alignment. He thought the small human ship would simply break itself against their massive front hull if they just held the line. He was terribly wrong. The Resolute ignored the standard Talon fighting shape completely. It dove hard beneath the giant dreadnought. The flat belly of the Dominion ship had very limited firing angles. No civilized species ever fought down there. It required perfectly timed math to avoid getting crushed by the dreadnought's deep gravity wake. This was not a neat war game. This was a brutal hunt. Morinth watched the green tactical map twist. Small black shapes dropped quietly from the human ship's tail. The Dominion sensors labeled them as harmless trash and ignored them. The trash drifted through the cold space. Then it slammed into the dreadnought's lower hull and stuck fast to the metal plates. The smart minds went off all at once. They did not break the giant ship apart. They did something much worse. They blew out the long-range sensor arrays. They melted the vital communication dishes. They cracked the main engine thrusters. In 40 seconds, a dead, heavy silence hit the main command network. Vthar's mighty 7-ship fleet broke apart. They were now 7 blind, deaf targets floating completely alone in the dark. The Resolute whipped around in a tight, fast spiral. It placed itself perfectly in the blind spots of all 7 Hegemon ships at the exact same time. The fast math needed to track all those broken weapon arcs in real time was insane. Vthar leaned heavily over his dead, sparking control panel. His proud face looked gray and deeply old. "How do they know our weak spots?" he whispered mostly to himself. Morinth wrote frantically on his glass data pad. His hands shook hard. Every single shot, every tight move the humans made exploited a specific flaw in the ship design. They did not find these weak spots during the short fight. They already knew them. This gray, ugly ship was built specifically to make the Dominion fleet totally useless. The Resolute drifted back into view of the single working camera. It sat there. It did not fire the killing blow. It just waited quietly in the dark, watching them bleed power into space. Morinth felt cold sweat run down his thick chitin plates. The amber lights on the bridge flickered and died, replaced by harsh red strips. The silence felt heavy. Nobody spoke a word. The proud officers of the Hegemon Dominion stared blankly at their dead screens. For 3,000 years, they had fought enemies who stood in straight lines and traded fire. They had never fought a fast shadow that knew exactly where to put the knife. Vthar looked up at the main screen. "Why aren't they finishing us?" the sensor officer whispered. "Because they didn't need to. They had already won the fight." Morinth realized the truth with a sick drop in his tight stomach. Every scientific paper the Hegemon had read about humanity was a flat lie. The simple merchant ships they had watched for decades were just metal shells wrapped around hidden null drives. Their slow, clumsy trade routes were actually deep mapping runs. Morinth looked at the date on his pad again. 53 years. Exactly 53 years ago, the Supreme Arbiter had locked humanity behind a hard wall. They had declared them too wild, too far behind to join the great stars. The Dominion had spent all those long decades watching the humans struggle on their small rock, but a mirror worked both ways. 53 years of the Dominion watching humanity meant 53 years of humanity watching the Dominion right back. They had carefully watched the patrol routes. They had measured the exact delay in the communication networks. They had done their homework in the dark while the Hegemon marched proudly in the bright light. The Resolute fired one last loud kinetic slug. It did not hit the ship. It smashed exactly through the central power relay buoy floating a mile away. The entire border sector went dark. The memory of that short battle slammed shut. Observer Primus Morinth stood in the massive council chamber on Orth Prime. He looked up at the main viewing screen. Captain Yara Okonkwo's face still filled the giant display. She stood on the bridge of the Resolute, calm and perfectly still. The grand tactical map behind her showed the real truth. The brutal attack on Vthar's fleet was not a random strike. It was a perfectly timed trick. While Vthar was completely blind, the real human fleet had slipped right past the broken border. Dozens of red markers blinked deep inside Dominion space. They held every major supply line. They choked off every single fleet base. Supreme Arbiter Korath sat high on his carved stone throne. The grand chamber walls, etched with the old names of 1,000 conquered worlds, felt like a cold tomb. "Your empire is built on big force and strict rules," Okonkwo said. Her voice rang loud off the crystal walls. "Ours is built on fast ideas and hard need. You have the massive numbers. We have the careful homework." Korath closed all 4 of his eyes slowly. The glowing scales on his thick throat shifted wildly. They flashed from calm blue to angry red and finally settled on a flat, sickly black. the color of pure fear. There will be no grand war, there will be no long siege, there will be only this choice. We could have wiped out your border fleet, Okonkwo said flatly. We chose not to. Consider it a clear show of what we can easily do, and a hard warning about our limits. Koreth opened his eyes. He looked at the bright red dots on the map. He looked at his silent, shocked generals. Draft the full withdrawal orders, the Arbiter whispered. Morinth stared at the map. The human fleet held tight positions that didn't even exist on Hegemon star charts. Where else were they hiding right now? The Grand Council chamber stayed completely quiet for 47 seconds. No angry general argued. No proud warlord shouted for revenge. 3,000 years of massive imperial rule ended in total silence. They had not been beaten by a larger army. They had been beaten by a quiet people who simply refused to play the game by the old rules. Morinth gripped his writing stylus so hard that it snapped cleanly in half in his left palp. He dropped the broken pieces onto the clean floor. The sound echoed loud in the dead room. He pulled out a fresh data pad from his coat. The military schools would have to burn all their books tonight. On the bridge of the Resolute, the main screen cut back to normal black space. Captain Okonkwo let out a long, slow breath. She looked down at her hip. The brass compass hung heavy on her gray belt. The needle finally stopped spinning and pointed straight toward a bright star the Empire had never named. The old galaxy had a completely new direction now.